Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Charles Collins from the podcast, The Way of Craftsmanship, which is about applying the principles of learning and applying a craft to the life itself, or as he puts it, a way of skillful living. Hi, Charles.
Good afternoon in the UK, Nicholas. Good morning here to those of us on the US East Coast side of the world, and hello to everyone else listening. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, then, so I found it really interesting as a concept of a podcast. And it's one of these things where I didn't expect to come across something like this. But it turns out that it seems like something very suitable for what I'm doing. So it's a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you very much. It is one of those things when you first hear it, especially if someone like myself is proposing that you have a look-see at what this work is all about, and someone coming from the framework that your podcast is focused on, it might seem a little bit strange at first blush for so many people listening to a spiritual or an inward focused idea to hear the word craftsmanship. It automatically invokes the idea of a hammer and a saw and wood and clay and any of those types of things. And people instantly think, well, what does this have to do with that? And then, as you said, it doesn't take too long once you start understanding the way that this has been researched and positioned and how we can use it, that it does have very deep spiritual and inward looking focus, and we can use it that way.
Yeah. So would you say that craftsmanship is actually inward focused?
It is. In fact, the word focus is at the center of the word craftsmanship. When you break that word down in English and you look at the history or the roots of the word and its component parts, craftsmanship, excuse me, where it comes from and what it means, what it brings the reader or the individual to understand is that this is a word that describes a level of excellence, a level of execution of something with excellence that requires a high degree of skill, a high degree of focus. And there's that word focus, because one has to unify or bring into synchronization one's mental state and physical state in whatever it's being done in such a degree of unity and flow that the end result is something, you could call it spiritual, you could call it a state of art, you could call it a state of insight or inspiration. Many things happen when men and women go to this place through their work, whatever that work is, mental work or hand work. When they arrive at this place that they're almost weightless, they're in this complete state of flow. And if you look or ask anyone, including yourself and those who listen to your podcast, perhaps about systems, methods, or techniques that they use for performing development of their inner spirit, their inner self, think about how long you've practiced those methods, how many hours you've sought to improve and understand and use those methods in a practical, skillful way. And as you start doing it for months and then years, and you start achieving incremental excellence in these methods that you're using, you are practicing, in the roots of the word, craftsmanship.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. So it's obviously an act of creation. So, but would you say it's an act of love?
Yes, I would say very much so, especially if the individual is applying their focus and their craftsmanship, craftswomanship, craftshumanship. It's a non-gender word. if they're applying that to something that invokes a high degree of pleasure, a high degree of satisfaction, we can use the word love, if you will, then there's no question that craftsmanship, if it's being executed on something that is of connected to the individual, it's a medium that they like, it's a set of processes that they relate to, it's a collection of tools, whether intangible or tangible, that they get pleasure from working with skillfully, then yes, you are practicing love. And when you take this to the next level, which is the focus of my work, that you are then taking that skill and that commitment and that focus and tools and processes and turning them to your own life as the work in progress, as the masterpiece which you are eventually going to make. I would say that that is an act of love, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. So it starts off with the commitment to do what you love to do. But then that's just the first step of a lifelong process, right?
That's
So
correct.
other than committing to starting it in the first place, what's the next step?
So the commitment part of it is one of four universal principles in craftsmanship. And that commitment in craftsmanship oftentimes is described as attitude of mind. So in the way of craftsmanship, it is critical for the practitioner to be aware of and to be committed to putting oneself in a mental state or an attitude of mind, which is to pursue a process and skillful utilization of tools and materials in order to achieve an excellent outcome, whatever that outcome is, whether it's a work, the result of a work, or something that's going to be delivered as a mental work or practice or state. This is the first thing that every discipline on the planet for thousands of years that I could find effectively is getting the apprentice, the acolyte, the new first level person to fully understand that you will not achieve mastery in any trade, craft, occupation, profession, pursuit until you first and foremost commit to and focus to the dedication required and the hours, thousands of hours required to learning this skilled trade occupation. So step one is the commitment. Step two then is formally entering into the study of the topic that you're going to pursue. It could be an internal mental topic, skill training, whatever it might be. It can be an external career. It could be the way in which you're looking at your family. But that first ultimate step is the body of knowledge that surrounds this particular topic or trade or occupation that you must study and learn. And at the center of that body of knowledge is the material of the trade or the craft. So if you look at any trade or craft, profession, whatever it is in the world, every one of them has a unique material that they're working with. Some of it is mined material. Some of it is external organic or synthetic material. So the knowledge of the material is step two, almost like a micro level knowledge of this material so that you know all the ins and outs. The third principal step in all the universal principles of craftsmanship is the processes or the manner by which you do the work. And so process and practice is a set of incrementally improving execution so that you are continuously improving the outcome, the end result, whatever that might be. It could be a sense of peace and inner knowledge, or it could be the creation of an evening meal in the kitchen. Either way, the processes must be continuously practiced and improved over time. And the fourth and final element are the tools of the craft or the trade or the endeavor. And when you apply tools, you must apply tools skillfully in order to achieve the outcome. So when you are introduced to the tools of the practice or the trade or the craft, You must learn what they are, why they've been designed, and how to use them skillfully so that when you apply tools to the material, whatever that might be, it's done with skill so as to not damage the material and to transform the material so that it comes out at the other side as envisioned, right? So in the way of life as a craft, if you take those four components, attitude of mind, the material you're going to work with, the processes you will apply, and the tools that you will use to transform the material, we now take a look at the human being. The human being is the material at the center of the craft of life, our inner human being and our outer human being. So if you apply tools to that inner or outer human being, not skillfully, or bad processes and practices, you probably will not achieve the intended outcome that you had envisioned for yourself.
So what is important for making sure that it's done skillfully and with the right processes?
So that's first and foremost understanding what it is that you're going to attempt to do when you apply processes and tools to a material. So if we want to stay on the human being now as a transition to the conversation, then let's talk about, for most of us, I think in a wide range of cultures and circumstances around the world, we don't start out our lives, and again, depends on the culture and the family that you come from, but many of us start out our lives or move through our early lives understanding or having been taught that you are the primary material of the craft, and that your material is constructed in the following way. You have the physical or outer human being, you have the internal or inner human being, and we're not taken through to really understand that material. We get glimpses of what it is. We're told, don't touch a hot stove. That's going to burn the outer human being. But especially when it comes to the inner human being, we don't know how to really break that down, or it's never broken down for us in a way that we can approach perfecting it, improving it, and developing it. So for most of us, and I think your audience will agree, we end up trying to patch things together as best we can by coming into contact with, mostly random, but sometimes we go out and look for it, some sort of a process or a procedure or a method that we can use to apply to an area of our inner or outer human being that we're concerned with or interested in or thinking about. And so as we go through life, for the most part, we're doing it randomly. We're doing it intuitively. We're doing it fly by the seat of your pants. And the idea behind life as a craft says, well, wait a minute, if we can do our trades, occupations, and professions in a structured way, and they figured that out, why can't we be taught to look at ourselves as craftsmen and craftswomen and have a more formal or structured approach to the way that we want to shape our inner human being and outer human being? So that's the start.
Right. And I suppose you need a foundational understanding of what you are. So I suppose that comes into understanding the material that you are.
Yes.
Right. And does that need to be done holistically?
Well, so like every trade, craft, and profession or occupation or vocation, there are various schools of practitioners, various methods or processes or procedures that they have codified that is their particular teaching approach to the question you've just asked. So there are some that may say holistically. There are some that approach it in a very compartmentalized component way and only specialize in one particular little functional area. In my particular case, when I looked at the idea of life as a craft, what I came upon was, if the material that we're working with is the human being, then how do we understand it, to your point, in a more holistic way? What is this material? Where did it come from? You know, is it wood? Is it clay? What are its characteristics? So that I don't break it, so that I only, shape it and bend it to its degree. And what I formalized for this particular school of thought or practitioners was the idea that there are 5 elements that are the fundamental curriculum to understanding this, and that the first element, where does the human being come from, starts with element 1, family and personal heritage. That becomes the foundational place to first look to how is this human being made? What are the characteristics of this human being? Because even though we're similar, those things imprint us and can make us very different right from the beginning. And you need to understand where you came from.
Right. And that applies physically and psychologically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so let's take a look at family heritage, element 1 in life as a craft, to understand its fundamental components. Inside there are, let's say, 15 different subtopics, family tree, family symbols, family stories, heirlooms, all these different elemental things that are part of family heritage. So family heritage has 3 stages. There is the heritage of the individuals in your family, that is your last name or your family name, that precede you. And we can learn about them and who they are through disciplines like genealogy, ancestry, things of that nature. And they came from different places. We hear that they migrated from here to there. We hear their family stories. Some of them were of one culture and others of them were other cultures. That all preceded us, and it marked and embedded and imprinted them in a particular way. And some of those experiences have been maintained and codified and are available to us when we learn and study them, and we bring them down to the second component, our present heritage today. When we learn about them, some of that informs us. Some of it informs us quite deeply. If you see any of these TV shows, when they're interviewing the people looking for their family tree, they get extraordinarily emotional when they learn about an ancestor who suffered something or who achieved something of great importance, that you see them light up. They connect to that as if it was part of them. And in a way it is, it's this lineage. But then bring it to today. The heritage that you were born into could be quite different from the country that your ancestor came from. And today's heritage has its own markings. Is it an affluent heritage, or are you being born into a country that's in war or famine or goodness knows something else? And that's that physical side. What is that heritage presenting to you and imprinting you with internally, psychologically? The language, its customs, its sacred places, its worldviews and cosmology that are talked about on the news every day, whatever it might be. So today's present heritage is imprinting you as much as you can draw from your past. And then when you decide what of that you're going to keep and what of that you decide is not really for you, as you grow older and you look at it, and some people don't even question it, it brings to the third component, which is in family heritage, what are you going to leave behind as a legacy? Are you going to leave something for the next generation? Will there be artifacts? Will there be heirlooms? Will there be stories? Will there be any of these things that you want to leave? So just take family heritage, that first element in life as a craft, and look at how much it has to do with shaping the human being, this primary material that you're going to work on even before you receive it at about age 14 or 15 as a young apprentice of your own life going forward. Think about that first 12 to 14 years of what you were and what you were made. You pretty well, as long as the people around you loved you and cared for you in a kind way, you accepted everything they gave to you. You became that heritage.
It conditioned you.
They did. Sure they did. Because they were conditioned by their parents and or the heritage around them. And as long as it didn't hurt them, they accepted it. They embraced it. They became that. There was no reason not to.
Right. And when we look at how we are in the present,
yes,
we have to understand how we became how we are now. And we need to look at the conditioning, look at psychological issues or experiences we've had. And so in the idea of craftsmanship, is there anything like inner work, or where you understand yourself?
Very
From a
much so. So craftsmanship in life as a craft, if we're practicing craftsmanship, which is that skillful execution, that second beside attitude of mind, which is, yes, I am a craftsperson or craftswoman. I shall be dedicated to incremental excellence and incremental improvement over time so I can incrementally improve the excellence of execution of my work. When you take that mindset and you commit to being that, which is actually an extraordinary thing because it makes us very happy. When we do something well, we feel very good and happy about ourselves. So that was done with skill, right? So when you then turn to the primary material, the human being, and if you're going to now begin being the craftsperson of your own life, you have to clearly understand that the human being is both the inner human being, which requires craft work, and the outer human being, which requires craft work. How you take care of your physical body, what you eat, the medicinals that you put into your physical body, the environment you expose your physical body to, are they harmful environments or are they reasonably supportive and growth environments? Well, those same attributes have to do with the inner human being. And unless we enter into understanding the attributes of the inner human being, which means we need mentors, you need teachers. And this is what you begin to learn as an apprentice, how to select a mentor for learning a particular topic so that they can teach you processes and skills. Yes, the inner human being is comprised of, not too dissimilar in my opinion, from the major organs and so forth of the outer human being. Well, there are major component elements of the inner human being we've been learning over centuries. And there are those instructors and teachers who try to bring that out and teach the apprentice what those components are. The thing is, as like in any trade, craft, or profession, there are schools of practitioners. So there are those schools of practitioners having to do with the elements of the inner human anatomy, right? That teach the inner human anatomy is constructed in a certain way and is balanced in a certain way. And there are other schools of practitioners that teach it differently. So over time, as a craftsman or craftswoman of your own life, what you are going to be doing is carefully selecting which mentors. The initial ones are usually given to you, and you're told, here is your teacher, here are your teachers, and learn what they have to teach you. And sometimes many times you take that up and you learn it as told to learn, and you may or may not question it. But over time in your life, you may find that that's not enough or not right or not comfortable. And you start seeking out other mentors and teachers for your inner work, your inner craftsmanship. And there is where your training as a craftsman or craftswoman becomes critically important as to how to go about locating which school of practitioners for my inner work do I want to listen to or attend, or an individual mentor or something of that nature.
So how do we discern that?
That is the journey. How we discern that, the simple answer is with skill over time. As we develop the skill of selection and discernment, because we start applying measures to the outcome of those other people's work, excuse me, to determine whether or not we wish to take them on into our own lives and hire them. It's kind of like a roof. You have a leaky roof and you say, okay, that's something that I want to work on. Now, if you have no idea how a roof is constructed or how a roofer as a trade or a craft is supposed to go about their craft and what the excellence of their work is and their reputation and so forth and so on, the first time you hire that roofer, it may be luck that you've got a good one, and it may not so be and you got a bad one because you didn't have any sort of a method by which to choose them. You had no experience. And in craftsmanship, it's about experience.
Right. So it's about drawing on your experience and gaining experience. So the important thing perhaps is, so I guess would you say it's important to pay attention and learn in the most effective manner to gain experience the most effectively?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good way of putting it. And now let's take those universal principles of craftsmanship again. There is the focus of mind or attitude of mind, then followed by knowledge of the materials, then followed by processes and practices by which the execution is being done, and then the tools of the trade, how they're being applied to determine excellence of execution. What is that final work product? So let's say that is the craftsman's lens, the craftswoman's lens. That's how they look at everything to determine whether or not the outcome of the work itself is of high quality. And as you begin to peel back an end work, first look to the work. What is the outcome of that work, of that trade or craft or profession, whatever it might be? And as you start getting skilled at reverse engineering that work, so to speak, peeling it back and looking at the quality and what's been produced, and is it long lasting, is it sustainable, you apply that same practice experientially to anything and everything you want to look at acquiring. So if you want to acquire entrance into a school of practitioners to do inner craft work, or an individual teacher mentor to help you align your inner craft work and improve your inner craft work, don't start at the beginning. Start at the end. Go to the work of the individual craftsman or craftswoman. Try to find examples of their work quietly and discreetly. And now begin looking into the outcome of the work. How do you determine the outcome of the work? Will depend upon how far away you are from that craftsman or craftswoman, how ease of access you have to their end work to see it and look at it and understand it. But in the way of craftsmanship, we've just arrived at the principal dynamic or underlying axiom of the way of craftsmanship, which is the work must speak for itself, and in such reveals the invisible craftsperson behind the work.
Right. So there might be things that because you can go on reputation, you can go on what they say about themselves, what people say about them, but you can only really know as a craftsman's person by looking at the craft.
Yes, the craft work, the end product, the executed result. And so one of the exercises that in my work that I talk about in the audio, the audio programs and in the written work is to know what high quality craftsmanship is and what it isn't. And so we teach an exercise in the work, which is to alone by yourself, together with family and friends and others, peers, for example, that might be practicing a craft or trade or a practice that you are also engaged in. We'll call those peers or journeymen and journeywomen or apprentice, peers, apprentice. Look at the end work of any trade, occupation, profession. It could be a law on the books at the city hall. It could be a decorative pot. It could be a culinary product, a bakery or a dish at a restaurant. It could be a symphony. Go to the end work and spend time to look at it mentally with your eyes, whatever it might be, and go into it, the aromas, the tones, the smells, and differentiate high quality executed work from that which is mediocre or that which is a knockoff, imitation, look-alike type of a thing with no quality, poor materials, bad workmanship. Teach yourself the difference between true craftsmanship excellence of execution in the finished product, and mediocre or worse, indifferent, poor craftsmanship. When you start becoming skilled at that, and you only get experience at it by looking at it. Look at a beautifully crafted Bentley, handcrafted by hand, versus a small little knockoff car. They had very different objectives. They had very different purposes. So understand true craftsmanship for what it is. And then that discipline of experience starts informing the way you look at everything else, including the mentors that you want.
Right. So you reverse engineer it, like you said. You learn about their processes, their focus, their mentality, perhaps.
Correct.
By looking at what they do. And then you can see the options for what they are. And that's how you make a choice.
And that takes training. And so the way of craftsmanship is teaching all of us that we succeed more often than not at anything we do in life that we've practiced at doing versus something that we lucked out. You were down the other end of a basketball court or a cricket pitch or wherever you are, and bang, you hit a one shot and went all the way down the end and out of the field. Now, everybody knows you're not a superstar, that it was just an amazing, extraordinary one-time event. Yeah. It was fabulous. Have somebody turn around and say, okay, do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. And only those that do it again on demand have achieved craftsmanship, right? They pursued craftsmanship in their training, but they achieved the level of excellence only through time and continuous improvement. So to your point, you'll only become good at identifying good craftsmanship from practicing at identifying good craftsmanship.
Right. So you select your mentor.
Yes.
What next?
So in the way of craftsmanship, when you've selected a mentor, you have to agree to the terms of the training of that mentor. And that's the first phase, that first element we talked about at the beginning here, the universal principles of craftsmanship, is attitude of mind. An attitude of mind means that you have committed to learn the body of knowledge and the materials and the processes and the tools, because that mentor is someone who's been 10,000 hours or more through and out the other side and has become not only a master in their trade or craft or vocation, but they have now determined that they are ready and willing to teach others. So once you present yourself this way, don't do it lightly. And that also means don't choose your mentors lightly. Try to find and take the time to train and learn to choose a mentor wisely so that you don't feel as though you've wasted your time at the end of the encounter. Improve your chances by improving your skill. So like every trade, craft, and profession, once you have committed to enter into learning that trade, craft, profession, and it doesn't mean you have to become a master in it. You can achieve other levels of proficiency. You've now entered into the first of 4 phases of any trade, craft, or profession, and the same applies to life. Phase 1 is apprenticeship. Phase 2, that's the learning phase. Phase 2 in any trade, craft, profession, occupation is the journey work phase. Journey work phase is when you're now going out to practice the knowledge and the processes and the tools that you've learned, and oftentimes make your way. Oftentimes we do it to make a living. But it doesn't necessarily mean you could be going to work on yourself. You're not being paid, but you're trying to skillfully improve yourself internally and externally. Once you've gone through your journey work phase and distinguish yourself as a skilled practitioner through practice and execution, you then move up to the next phase, which is masterworks or mastery, or the masterworks phase. And mastery is normally determined by the school of practitioners or the guild of practitioners in what you trained in. So for example, if you trained under a mentor and went through the apprenticeship phase and then went through several years of journey work phase with that mentor, practicing, and the mentor is seeing that your quality of your work is good, only the mentor or their standard bearers, could be guild or society, whatever, will give you mastery, will present, once you've presented a work, a masterpiece, they will allow you to be a master if you pass that test, right? And now you're a master. And so then the fourth and final phase for any is mentorship, which is, I'm not talking about mentoring as you go along, which we all do to someone coming up behind us, but mentorship is a formal entry into a time frame in which you're dedicated completely to mentorship as an act and as a phase or process. And in life, as a craft, if life is going to be practiced as a craft, those phases have to exist, and they do.
So you come full circle, and eventually you are the one mentoring someone else.
Correct.
And do you learn through that process yourself?
Absolutely. You never, ever stop the pursuit of craftsmanship, which is excellence of execution and small incremental improvement, right? And so it's incremental excellence. So as you move into formally mentoring as a trade unto itself, and not necessarily practicing as a master in that craft, or you could be doing both, mentoring as a phase or as a state has with it a similar body of training and learning and improvement that anything else does. It's one thing to be working at your trade, occupation, and profession, whatever that might be, and have achieved a level of mastery. And there are only very few things in life that we have the time to become master. We can become high-level apprentice and or journeyman and journeywoman, skilled practitioner in quite a wide variety of things. But to achieve mastery in something usually is 10,000 hours or more and beyond. And you just don't have enough time in your day to do that, right?
Right.
So you want to choose. So you also want to be very wary of those that are saying, you know, we're going to make you master in 2.5 weeks in this or that, or, you know, master yourself or this. It's just in the way of craftsmanship, you would just turn away from that because you would realize that's not true craftsmanship. It's fake imitation, look-alike, using the words and using some of the symbols or whatever, but it's not the true element. So in mentorship, right. Yes, go ahead.
So do you repeat the cycle in a new way once you complete the cycle of the 4 stages?
No, because I think, as I understood your question, but maybe it'll come out yes. When in life as a craft, you are going through those 4 phases. This takes place over an 80-year period. Do you want to get back to an individual trade or occupation, so to speak?
Well, we can get to that in a moment, but I just realized this question was a little bit silly because, yeah, if it's a life, the only real answer to that question is the next life. And we're dealing with one life at a time.
True enough. I mean, life is an ancient journey. You know, for some it's finite, and for others it is infinite. And whether it is finite or infinite, at one time or another, you know, each of us has tried to determine or make sense, what shall I make of my life? Whether it is defined by the twin events of birth and death, or whether it is a timeless, never-ending journey, that is an individual's inner being accepting and making that determination for themselves, which makes their particular masterpiece that they are creating at the end unique. Even though we are all similar, everyone's masterpiece will be unique. So in the way of life as a craft, it is particularly concerned with our time on Earth, those approximately 80 years. Beyond that, if it continues, I see no reason why those, or if it does continue, that why can't it continue to be practiced into eternity? But I don't know.
Right. Suppose that you've got a particular craft, and throughout your life, you might have chosen a craft, but you manage to get to the level of you complete. Suppose you master mentorship, that you finish the fourth stage of something. What do you choose a new craft but apply what you've learned from the past one to it, or what comes next?
In life as a craft, where there are the 5 elements of the curriculum, the 5 master things that one can learn to make a well-rounded masterpiece of their life, and that curriculum is going to be learned incrementally over 4 phases of life, and the 4th phase of life, mentorship, comes at age 65, and you cross into mentorship and beyond, 65 to 85 and beyond. In that particular case, that the craft of life is structured that way. We can talk more
Right.
about it.
I'll give you a little bit of context for my question. I'm thinking of, there's a certain martial artist. I think he was Jet Li, but I'm not sure. Where he learned a particular martial art, brought it to its highest level, and then he started exploring a way to do martial arts in a way that isn't one specific martial art, but rather is universal to all of them, and also a sort of life philosophy as well. And that's what I have in mind, I guess, when it comes to, yes, you've got a life journey, but when you choose a particular craft, you might complete it and then, I don't know. I'm just wondering if you maybe bring that together into, I suppose maybe in life you choose a particular craft, but in the overall craftsmanship of life, you need to apply what you've learned to your overall life. You don't just stick to a particular craft itself. Would you agree?
So what I'm watching you do here is go through the process of the apprentice, when for the first time and you are questioning, you are understanding, you in the workbench of your mind, you are rearranging components and parts and fashioning them and looking at them and so forth and so on. You're doing mental craft work right now, which is something that we absolutely all do. And the answer to your question is in a context of 2. The larger context is life as a craft, or the craft of life. So in the craft of life, we have the larger curriculum, of which all these other little micro things that we do, our career and profession, our family and management, our personal finances, the tools that we use, all these different sub-elements and components are all contained within it. And we practice them incrementally over time, all of our lives, and achieve certain levels of proficiency in all of them over our lives for the 4 phases. Now, it is a very common human experience for thousands of years where 1 or maybe 2 or 3 things out of that collection of things we will do in our life, that we achieve a high level of mastery. For a great many of us, that is our career path, that which we have done to earn money and revenue, grow our families, and take care of ourselves. For those that are not earning revenue from that activity, it may be the management of a household. You know, a mother or father who's completely dedicated full-time to that trade or craft. They're not necessarily making money from it, but they are ensuring the well-being of the family by being a master craftswoman or craftsman in managing that household, and will continue to do so over their lifetime. Now, in the case of any of us that has a particular career, trade, occupation, vocation, whatever that might be, that we dedicate most of our time or a great deal of our time to, and we achieve levels of master in that trade, craft, and profession as determined by the standards body that I was talking about a little earlier, other practitioners. Then each individual from that point forward is now going to continue to expand and explore how they will deal with that and treat it. Will Jet Li, for example, once he's achieved that mastery in his particular, or Bruce Lee or whoever it was, achieves Jeet Kune Do, I think is what you're referring to. And when you achieve that particular level of mastery, do you then continue to practice that school of practitioners that you went to? Will you become a mentor in that school to others, apprentices coming up through? Or will you, from that stage, begin a new work, which is this next level work in mastery, in which you are now moving outside of the one school of training that you trained in and became a master, and you're seeking to develop a new level in the craft or the trade through a synthesis of other crafts and trade schools that are teaching in the same medium, martial arts. This is a very common practice in trades, occupations, and professions, vocations for thousands of years. As people go through and become masters in one school, oftentimes they will go off and begin to develop in another school. And technically, while they're entering apprenticeship in that other school to learn it, because of their mastery skill in a parallel school, I'm not talking about the difference between car mechanics and bakers. That's too far apart. But in similar trade, they're so well advanced in one that it does provide them a faster track, even though they're starting as an apprentice in the new school, whatever it might be. So for someone like Bruce Lee, who was a craftsman in his particular martial art, which he started, which was Wing Chun, it was a northern art and that he practiced in Hong Kong. He then went on to look at other schools, which there are hundreds of them all over China, and as often happens, now becomes a single practitioner in a new school, one that he established of his own. He became a single practitioner. He established a new school. And by the establishment of that school, what happened? The apprentices began to knock on his door, and he began to mentor and teach Jeet Kune Do.
That's very elegant. I like that. And I'm wondering, so we've been talking about how an individual goes through their journey. They may interact with other journeymen at a certain point. But what about on a collective level or on a societal level? Are there any dynamics there that we could explore?
In the traditional way of craftsmanship, in many trades and occupations for thousands of years that followed this same phases of development, continuous development and improvement, even though some of them don't use the same words, like in the university setting, they'll usually call it the undergraduate, then you move on to your master's degree, and then you read for your doctorate or PhD, right? You go through these three levels, which is apprentice, journey work, and mastery, those three levels. In traditional crafts, they use those terms. You start as apprentice, you move on to journey work, as we've described it. And once you enter journey work, you're now into the societal level that you were just describing. So as an apprentice, you are usually contained within a very specific rigid structure during your learning phase. And in life as a craft, that starts at about age 14 and runs to about age 24, 25. This is the learning phase in life as a craft, the apprenticeship phase. And you're learning, you're going to schools, you're being taught in different places and different things in order to prep you for crossing over to the next phase of life as a craft. And truly, this is what happens. You enter journey work. And in journey work, what happens both in the traditional and in trades, you're let out into the world. You are now entering into society. And the idea behind this for all trades, occupations, and professions, including life, which are the rites of passage from childhood to adulthood, is to prepare you to enter society of adults as a skilled craftsman or craftswoman, someone who has something of value to bring. Listen very carefully to that lesson. You have been prepared as someone who has something of value to bring and present into society. You have skills, you have knowledge, you have training and use of tools, and you are capable of producing something that is of benefit to someone else. This is the training behind craftsmanship. You don't sit alone by yourself in the dark somewhere. If you're going to earn your living, and if you're going to be financially as well as spiritually successful, you have to be presenting a work of quality which speaks for itself and benefits someone else, from fixing the plumbing under their sink to helping them navigate a medical circumstance and condition, to being in a situation with the law and being skillfully taken through that to the other side in a successful manner. So the answer to your question is apprenticeship in life and in all of our trades is designed to train and make you ready for being a contributor in the next phase of life to society when you enter your journey work.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned value, and I think you kind of defined it. It sounds like what you're saying is when you're doing something of value, you're providing value for others or a service for others.
Absolutely. That is the end game, the end deliverable of craftsmanship is to produce a result that has value not only to the creator and brings them self-esteem from excellence of execution, but has a positive impact on society around them. In the Japanese traditions of craftsmanship, and one of the episodes that I produced called The Way of Craftsmanship takes you on a journey to 7 different continents, 7 different places, and introduces you to the craftsman traditions in those parts of the world. And in the Japanese, and particularly the Greek views of craftsmanship, what they required in order for you to gain the title of craftsman, shokunin, or tekne in Greek, was that you had to be able to not only reflect, but then describe in a narrative form who in society was benefiting from the work that you were producing. What is the impact on society from the work that you were producing? And if you could not prove that there was a positive impact being delivered to society, those outside yourself, you were not allowed to carry those titles of craftsman, shokunin or tekne, until you realized and then did your work so that it benefited society. And this is the really interesting thing. In today, they try to teach you, go out, make money, and then, oh yeah, you have to contribute back to society somehow, and now figure out how that is. In the traditional way of craftsmanship, for your audience to go deep into and think about why craftsmanship is so unique as a word and a way of life, is that by the result of your work alone, it automatically had built into it a contribution to society.
Right. And what that means is to get the end result, you need to start with your reason from the outset being some kind of value or service.
Wonderful.
And how do we figure that out before we start? What our value will be?
So this is another fundamental principle of craftsmanship, which is the understanding of what the end objective is to be before you begin entering the process. So it was always declared, and this becomes what they would teach is one of the tools of mind craft. And Mindcraft is a unique trade and a unique craft, which is universal to all human beings. And it's the only trade or craft that uses the same exact material, every human being, than any other trade or craft. And it is the material of human thought. Now, human thought oftentimes is not described by certain people as a tangible material that can be shaped and formed and produced and incrementally improved over time into a finished work. But there are thousands of trades and occupations that deal in mindcraft, from mathematics to philosophy to the spiritual traditions to language arts. And I could mention many, many more. They all universally deal in this one primary material called human thought. And so in the Greek way of craftsmanship, what they would teach is that before you apply processes or before you apply tools to the primary material of the craft, whether it's human thought on the workbench of your mind, or whether it is a material with your hands that is going to be touched and presented, you have to, using a tool of Mindcraft called reflection, clearly understand what is the end object that you are going to be producing, because craftsmanship is about the production of an end object, an end result, whether it's an object of thought or an object of the hands. You cannot enter into the production, the action of crafting, until you understand why you're doing it. What is the end objective? What is the end objective of creating a law, a legislation by a body of, governors? Yes, they have in mind something that is going to benefit the welfare of the community. How does someone who's making a law, the legislator or the judge, determine whether or not to engage in a work or not? The answer has to be, will this benefit the community before we even start the work? How does a doctor or a physician or a healer know what to do if they don't understand the end objective is health of the individual? And what does health mean? Only through knowledge and study do they first understand health is a state of balance in the physical and the non-physical human being. And by me studying and understanding what is the ideal balance of health, now when I see a human being that has got a broken arm or something internal is not right, I understand there is a recipe to apply in order to correct or improve or repair that thing to bring it back to a state of balance. So the key element to your question is you always, in the way of craftsmanship, first must learn, which is study and observation, what is the end result that needs to be achieved by the work. Otherwise, you're not a craftsperson. You're simply, who knows what you are. You're just running about, flailing your arms in the air.
Yeah. So thank you for coming to me for this interview. It really, it's a unique angle, but it's also a universal angle.
Absolutely.
On life. So yeah, and I hope the listener enjoyed it too. Yeah. And if you're interested, feel free to check out his podcast and his website. So yeah. Well, everyone, have a nice day, and yeah, you too. Thank you for coming along. How did you find it?
Good. I think you were reflecting quite a bit.
Hopefully I was doing it right then, if I was reflecting.
Yeah, I mean, you're listening to something for the first time, and I think you were taking a lot on board. And I think you were in the workbench of your mind putting parts and pieces together and assembling and disassembling. I'm sure you'll be, doing work on this for a while now, thinking about it.
All right, then. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nicholas.